You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
This is not a card game. This is episode 52 of the Soulforge Podcast.
Welcome to the Soulforge, a place of silent mystery, quiet contemplation, and outright mayhem. Join your host, Sean Vanderloo, as he guides you through the adventures of living. Together, we'll talk about life and love, sex and dating, joy and heartache, memories and loss, and so much more. Don't worry, it's not nearly as pretentious as it sounds. Get ready for life, the universe, and everything on the Soulforge.
Greetings and salutations, listeners. Very glad to welcome you back to the show if you're a long-time listener, and also very happy to welcome any new listeners that we might have this week. So 52 episodes. You'd almost think we'd been doing this podcast for a year, but of course we haven't been. Well, I haven't been. My guests have helped as well, which I'm very grateful for. But no, 52 weeks in a year, 52 episodes. The one-year anniversary mark will come sometime at the end of July. I believe it was July 30th or 31st where I released the first episode. But we're getting close to that. It is the middle of the first week of June 2018. Here we are. Here I am. Well, here you are listening to the episode of this podcast, The Soulforge. And what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about gratitude, gratefulness, appreciation, and the lack thereof. I've been thinking about this topic all week long, and if I had recorded it earlier in the week, this may have been a very different episode where I was full of anger and frustration. I'll get into that in a little bit. So for anybody who's new to the podcast, the Soulforge is all about life, the universe, and everything, as you heard in the opening introduction. And who did that for me? Well, that would be my friend Jarman, who does a Play on Nerds podcast. He's a voiceover artist, amongst other things. So a good shout out to Jarman. If you need any voiceover work, look him up. Check out a Play on Nerds podcast. You can get all his information right there. He's great. He lives down in Florida. So Jarman, thanks again for doing that. That's awesome. What else can I tell you about the podcast? It took a long time to come up with the name, The Soulforge. Went through a million different things. There's a whole episode about it. I'm not going to get into it right now. Recent developments is that both this podcast and my other show, the Rusted Robot Podcast, joined the ESO, or the Earth Station 1 network. That's mainly a geek-centered podcast network. The Soulforge is one of the few shows on that network that is not geek-centered. This podcast is more about things that I've learned, things that I've gone through, difficult subjects to talk about that most people don't bring up, so I bring them up. Sometimes I interview people like I did the Australian rapper and Mediterra, who is a tantric expert, and she has actually recently gone back to her real name. On Facebook, she was Mediterra, and now she's gone back to Lauren Nicole Peters. So she's going through all kinds of changes. Maybe we'll get her back on the show sometime soon. I guess we did do a geek-centered episode when I threw in my interview with Larry Nemeczek, because he was launching the Trek Files podcast.
Hey, this is Dr. Trek, Larry Nemeczek, and you're listening to Soulforge with Sean Vanderloo.
So that was kind of like a bonus episode where you guys got two that week. So that's kind of why there has been 52 episodes and not yet 52 weeks. And why am I telling you all this? I'm not really sure. I just feel like I want to be more open and forthcoming, because recently I have been accused of not talking about myself very much on the show. Although I have listened to the episodes again, and I think that I'm talking about myself. But that's a criticism that I wanted to address. Do you guys think I don't say enough about me? If you feel that's the case, I would love to hear your comments, your feedback. Email me, soulforgepodcast@gmail.com. All right, so let's talk about appreciation and not being appreciated. First of all, what am I appreciative for? Well, I'm appreciative for everybody who downloads the podcast, anybody who shares the link with people they know. If you've left a review in the iTunes store or whatever podcatcher pod app that you use, if you've left a review, if you've left a rating, that's awesome. I appreciate it. It gets the word out. It lets more people know about the show. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to spread a message of hope and positivity and communication. So I'm also grateful for Mike and the gang at the Earth Station 1 Podcast Network for allowing me to join their team, I guess, their group, their network. Mostly it was to put the Rusted Robot podcast on there because that's been going for 4.5 years. It's a geek-centric thing. And I said, you know what, if I'm going to be on the network, I'll bring both shows. So the Soul Forge is one of the rare shows, not specifically geeky. What else? So I'm grateful for that, for the wider reach of the audience. A big thing happened for the Rusted Robot podcast this week. We reached 200 episodes, which is a great big deal. So what did we do? Well, if you don't listen to that show, we did something pretty rare. Normally we talk about casting news. We'll talk about movies that are coming up or movies that we've just seen. We'll talk about celebrity deaths. We'll talk about trailers. We'll talk about TV shows that are interesting. We'll talk about comic books, all kinds of geeky subjects like that. Well, we reached 200 episodes and we wanted to do something fairly different. Normally on a big anniversary show, you do a recap episode or talk about things that you've done or hopes for the future. What we decided to do was, actually a few months ago, we put up a poll. We were going to drunk watch something. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie from 1990, won out in the poll. We had some drinks, me and Josh, and actually Shane and Luke were there as well. So there was 4 of us. We got drunk, or drunkish, watched the movie, recorded our comments in real time. The episode actually ended up being like an hour and 46 minutes. Normally the show is anywhere from 55 to 105 minutes. So this was long, but it's an anniversary episode, and it came out, and I posted it in the Pod People Twitter group that I'm on. It's a bunch of other podcasts that retweet each other and listen to each other's shows. I was on the Chewed Gum podcast this past week with famous Seamus, so I appreciate him allowing me to be on his show and spreading the word of the Rusted Robot and Soul Forge podcasts. If you're looking for some cool podcasts other than what's on the ESO network, if you're on Twitter, just put in the hashtag PodPeople, and all of our shows are on there. We always link it up. And there's lots of good shows on there. I've listened to several of them, and we all help each other out, just like in the ESO network. So check that out. Thanks again to famous Seamus and the crew, and thanks to everybody in the Pod People chat who actually retweeted the heck out of episode 200 of the podcast. So it came out Sunday, and by Monday afternoon when I checked the stats, it had over 65 listens, and often it takes up to Thursday to get that many. So that's really awesome. I was surprised that there were so many listens so quickly, especially for such a long episode. So that's really great. Very appreciative of everybody who listened, or even listened to part of it, or retweeted it, or liked the links, or told their friends, or whatever. Big shout out to Melissa at the Brook Reading Podcast. I've listened to her show. She's pretty great. She reviews books and so on. By a Brook. And so she reads books by a Brook, and hence the name of the Brook Reading Podcast. And there's all kinds of great shows on there. Like I said, Chewed Gum, Tuesdays with Mary, One Giant Leap for Geek Kind, I think is what it is. I don't have it in front of me right now. So many different things. Go check them out. All kinds of great podcasts. So once again, thankful for that. What else am I thankful for? I'm thankful to friends and family who've reached out to me when they can tell that I'm not having a very good day. Somehow people just know, and they reach out and they ask how you're doing. And not everybody knows, but they can usually see it in your face or how you're texting them back or whatever. So to those people who pay extra special attention, I'm grateful and thankful.
If you're loving this podcast, you should tell tell a friend about it.
Spread the word about podcasts you think they would enjoy. There's something for everyone, from entertainment and lifestyle
To news and politics
and more. Share it on social media.
Believe it or not, some people don't know how great podcasts are.
or even how to find and listen to them.
You can help change that with a click. Tell your friends about your favorite podcast.
Thanks for spreading the word.
Now, why was it that if I had recorded this earlier in the week, would this have been a very different, angrier podcast? Well, I'm going to tell you some stuff that I'm not sure I'm supposed to, but I'm going to do it anyway because I really don't care right now. So, as many of you know, I'm on the board for the NOE, or the Northern Ontario Expo Comic-Con Timmins group. We bring a geeky show to Timmins once a year, and for the last 2 years, I guess, I was the social media coordinator, so responsible for tweeting and Instagramming, posting on the Facebook page, about all kinds of different things, fun things that are going on in town, letting people know when the expo is, other events that are happening, like the Halloween party and whatnot. So in the past year, these two girls were added to the board, and they've started going and doing the costume contest and really helping out, and they did a great job. But one of the girls in particular did nothing but criticize the fact that I posted the podcast links to the episodes for the Rusted Robot podcast on the NOE Facebook page. And since the Rusted Robot is the official podcast of the NOE, there's nothing wrong with that. But they didn't like that. So they've been taking down all my links. And at our board meeting last week, where we were talking about what's coming up for the future and how it went on, Jason, the head of the NOE, the president, I guess, he just said right there in front of everybody, "Oh, Sean, the girls are taking over the social media job, so we don't need you for that anymore." And what the hell? What the heck was that all about? He didn't take me aside. He didn't say, "Hey, we appreciate what you've been doing so far, but the girls are better at it." He could have done it in private. He didn't have to do it in front of the entire board. That wasn't very nice. Makes me feel like crap. And they've been taking down the links. I'm just not happy about it. And then we were talking about what kind of guests to have for next year's show and whether we should have one or not. And they don't think we should, because it's going to be the 9th show and they want to save up all the money for the 10th anniversary show, which I can understand. But people aren't going to want to come to an expo if there's no guest. Even a small guest would make the thing worthwhile. And Larry Nemechek, who you know from a previous episode on this podcast,
Hey, this is Dr. Trek, Larry Nemechek.
is a relatively inexpensive guest, which we could afford. It wouldn't be anywhere near the past guests that we had, and it would still be somebody, not a lot of people know who he is, but he's a minor celebrity that would draw people in. People would want to know who he is, and everybody shot my idea down. So I'm trying to help make the show better, and all my ideas were ripped apart. My job was taken away without "Hey, how you doing? Thanks for what you've done." So I was very angry and mad, and I don't get mad. That's the thing. I'm not an angry person. I don't like it. I don't like feeling rage or anything like that. So I had to take a few days to calm down and record this episode. So you could probably still hear a little bit of fire in my voice because it pisses me off. And I don't like it. I like to have a nice equilibrium in my life. I'm balanced, live and let live, but every once in a while, somebody drives me crazy and I want to cause violence to their body. I don't like it. It's not good. But what do I like? I like it when people comment on the podcast, and here's a good time to thank Richard from Australia for commenting on the show, as he does from time to time. He doesn't do every episode, and I don't expect it, but every once in a while, he does. And it puts a smile on my face. And that's great, and I appreciate it. And also Daniel Hitch. He makes lots of comments on the stuff that I do. You've heard him on episode... Well, I don't have it in front of me, but it was the one where we talked about him being a writer. So go check out Daniel Hitch, because he's awesome.
Hello, I'm Daniel Peter Hitch, author of the Bubbles the Pirate children's book series and the Connected Worlds Chronicles. You're listening to the Soul Forge podcast. Keep forging your soul.
What else can I tell you guys? I don't know, but here's a promo for another podcast on the ESO network. Take a listen.
Haven't been listening to the Revcast? Here's what you're missing.
The sharks have an economy based on gold?
Apparently.
You have a shark like decked out like Mr. T with the bling all over it.
Oh, now I want to see that. I want somebody to draw a picture of a shark with a mohawk God pity the fool.
I'm done.
The Revcast by RevolutionSF.com. Available at RevolutionSF.com, iTunes, and part of the ESO network.
Okay, so that was awesome. I don't know which one I put in there because I haven't edited it yet, but what I do appreciate from the ESO network is that we all play each other's promo, and on the Facebook group for the hosts, we always tell each other what promo or what podcast played what promo, so that's great. I've been just going through the list of bumpers or promos or trailers for the podcasts in sequential order as they are in the Google document. I take turns. The Soulforge will do one, and then the next one is done by the Rusted Robot or whatever podcast that I happen to be editing next. Just going to keep playing promos as the time goes on, and if you guys are listening, that's great. And if I've gotten any listeners from promos that have been played by other podcasts, I'm highly appreciative and grateful for that. Also, I would be grateful if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can listen to all the episodes of the podcasts right on there on your computer while you're doing something else. You can have it on in the background. Just go to YouTube, look up my name, Sean Vanderloo.
Sean Vanderloo.
Subscribe, and they're all right there for you. Hey, did you guys know that I'm on Instagram? I know I say most of this stuff at the end in the standard end credits sequence, but not everybody listens to that. So go check me out on Twitter and Instagram for my personal stuff at Darth Vaderloo. Maybe join the Facebook page, facebook.com/Soulforge Podcast, I believe. Don't quote me 100% on that. I think that's what it is. Just look up Soulforge Podcast and you'll find it. And if you'd like to go check out the Rusted Robot Podcast too for some geeky goodness, well, that would be awesome as well, and I definitely appreciate that. What else do I want to talk about on this episode? I was going to do a bunch of book and movie recommendations, but I think maybe what I'll do is a specific episode for that one day in the future. I think that's going to be all for this week. It's a little bit shorter than normal, but I've got a million things to do this weekend. I am going with my Klingon friends, the Crimson Dawn, and we're all heading out this weekend to Sudbury to participate in Graphicon, which is another convention here in Northern Ontario. So I have lots to do, lots to get ready for. Not too much time for extra stuff like editing podcasts and whatnot. But next week, there'll be something more exciting to talk to you about. So keep coming back to the Forge of Souls right here on the ESO network and soulforgepodcast.com and on YouTube and on Facebook and everywhere else you want to be. So once again, gratitude and gratefulness. It's important to let people know how you feel. I know that I don't necessarily tell people enough how much they mean to me and what I appreciate about them. So I'm going to keep on doing that in the future, getting better and better. That's what I need to do. That's what we all need to do. Let people know how you feel, because you could just make someone's day. If you would, tell your friends about the links, share the links, join the Facebook page, join the Soulforge everywhere that it is. You'll hear all that stuff upcoming in the end credits. And until next time, remember, we will never get back the life we waste trying to be normal. This has been another episode of the Soulforge Podcast. Contact the show by emailing soulforgepodcast@gmail.com or by tweeting soulforgepod on Twitter. Visit us at soulforgepodcast.com, and remember, the best way to show your support is by leaving a 5-star review in the iTunes Store. And, if you would, please check us out and like us on Facebook. The Soulforge Podcast was written, produced, scored, edited, engineered, and directed by Sean Vanderloo. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Darth Vaderloo. For more great content, you can listen to my other podcast, The Rusted Robot. Thanks for stopping by the Forge. We'll keep the fires lit until your next visit.
I could do this all day.
Thank you, India. Thank you, terror. Thank you, disillusionment. Thank you, frailty. Thank you, consequence. Thank you, silence.
all of you for coming out tonight. We love you dearly. I want to thank you for 40 years of a really great time.
If you guys wouldn't mind, I'd just like to write out my weekly thank you notes right now. Is that cool with you guys? Is that all right? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. James, can I get some thank you note writing music, please?
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping through Amazon.com or the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.